Hey y'all, it's getting cooler where I live, so today's project is a classic sweatshirt hoodie. So we've got the hood, we've got the grommets and the drawstring. This even has the traditional kind of kangaroo pocket here. And I've got a pattern to share with you to make this. Now I made this sweatshirt for the coach who wears between a small and a medium in men's sizing, depending on the store. So this is going to fit up to a 38-inch chest. And of course, you know, if I didn't mind wearing an oversized sweatshirt, this would fit me as well with some extra room. Or I will have a link below to how you can grade a pattern and you can size this up or size this down to fit your own particular measurements. To make this, you're going to need about 1.5 yards of 60-inch wide sweatshirt fleece or fleece. And then of course the pattern that you'll have to visit the link below for the details on. So let's gather those supplies and then I'll meet you back at the camera and we will start sewing this project. Let's talk supplies. I've used the pattern to cut out all my pieces, so I have 2 sleeves, 1 pocket, 1 front, 1 back, 2 hood pieces, 2 cuff pieces, and 1 waistband piece. I'm also going to be using 2 scraps of interfacing to reinforce where we put the eyelet holes. And because we're doing eyelets, I have an eyelet kit. And I've got a mallet, which this tool actually resides in my sewing room, but you can use a regular old hammer to do this as well. And then for the drawstring, I bought a kid's shoelace package because that's going to be just the right length to go around the head and have some drawstrings. And then of course scissors, pins, regular sewing supplies. So we're going to start with the hood. And put the rest of this aside. And I've gone ahead and I've marked where the eyelet is going to go and I've fused a little piece of interfacing behind each of those marks. And we're going to start by putting in the eyelets. These are also known as grommets. Oops. So we're going to need 2 of them. And this little kit to install them. So if you look carefully at the eyelets, you'll see that there's a couple of different pieces and we need to make sure that we have 1 of each for each side of the hood. The 2 different eyelet pieces look like one is deeper than the other is shallower. So those are the 2 different pieces I need. And then of course I need the little installation kit. You're going to start by snipping the tiniest hole you can where you want the eyelet to go. So use the tips of really sharp scissors. Even that's a bigger hole than I maybe would have preferred. But start with a teeny little hole, and if your fabric stretches, that would be enough. This doesn't stretch and it's got that interfacing, so I'm going to actually snip it in a little X so that I can open it like that. Take the deeper half of the eyelet and you want to push that from the right side. So the deeper side goes on the right side of the fabric and you want to push that on up into the little hole you've made. And you can see why you want to make the smallest hole possible. If you make a bigger hole, it's going to be very easy for this eyelet to tear through. Once you've got that pushed in, you're going to put it on the little anvil piece. Or sorry, the strike plate. This is the anvil. And then you want to put the shallow side on top. And then we're going to take the anvil piece and fit it into that hole. And then use your mallet. All right, use your mallet and hit the anvil. And what happens is that inner eyelet, the prongs get pressed out and now you've got a hole and the eyelet is being held in place. So you're going to repeat that on the other side as well. Once we've got the eyelets inserted, then we can go ahead and place the 2 hood pieces right sides together, and we're going to stitch all along this curved edge that goes on top of the head. Once we've sewn the hood, the next step is going to be to create the channel around the face that the drawstring is going to go through. So what you're going to do is you're going to fold the edge of the hood over, and it is going to just cover where that grommet or eyelet is. And let's go ahead and pin this. Now there are markings on the pattern for where the fold line is, but if you haven't transferred the markings or you have a fabric where it's difficult to transfer the markings, it is a 1-inch allowance, and that is assuming that you are using fabric that does not need to be finished on the edges, which knit fabrics do not. If you did not use a serger and you have 2 seam allowance pieces of fabric here, don't press them open like you normally would. You need to press them to one side so that the drawstring doesn't catch as you're pushing it through. Alright, once you've got that casing pinned in place, you need to stitch right along the edge. Be very careful in this area where the grommet is so that your needle doesn't hit the metal. You want to be right on the edge. You may also have a little bit of a difficulty feeding this part through your machine with the grommet on the bottom, so just be careful, go slowly there, lift your presser foot and hand crank the machine if you need to. This part of the hood does not need to stretch, so you can use a straight stitch, and that's what I'm going to do because this fabric has very little vertical stretch. However, if you're using a really stretchy fabric to make this, you are going to want to use a stretch stitch just so that the stitches won't pop out. Again, be really careful in this area with the grommet if you're using a zigzag stitch to make sure that your needle doesn't hit that metal. So let's go sew this. Okay, once you've got the drawstring casing sewn in, this is what it's going to look like. And I find it easier to thread my drawstring through at this point. So I've got one of the shoelaces and I'm going to thread it through. After you've threaded the shoelace through the casing, it's going to look like this, and then we can put the hood aside for now, and we're going to turn our attention to the front and the pocket. So let's go ahead and open up the front, and you can see because I had it folded that I can still see the center of the front. That's going to be important. If you can't see center front on yours, you're going to want to fold it back in half and use an iron just to press a little bit on this center front line so that you will be able to see it to align the pocket. Now with the pocket, what we're going to do is open it so that it is wrong side up, and we need to finish these curved and side edges of the pocket. The top's going to get finished when we attach it to the front. So what you want to do is you're going to fold in and pin the curved and side edges. You're going to have to stretch a little bit along the curves to get this to lay flat. So at the corners you can see I folded one edge and now I'm folding the other, and when I stitch we're going to stitch and then turn. And this is a 3/8 inch fold here. Now that we've got this pinned, we're going to sew just the curved edges. Don't worry about these straight ones yet. Those will get sewn when we attach this to the front. So I'm going to take this and use a stretch stitch and get it sewn. Once you have sewn the curved edges, it's going to be time to align the pocket on the front of the sweatshirt. And just a note, I used my cover stitch machine to sew these edges, and that's how I got this double stitching look. You could also do this with a twin needle on a regular sewing machine. So what we are going to do is we are going to align the center of the pocket with the center of the shirt, and we are going to match up those bottom edges of the pocket. Then you want to fold down the top here, and we're going to pin that in place. And what I'm doing is this pin is just going to these are kind of just holding it, because instead of having stitching line here, I am going to now flip up the pocket, and I'm going to stitch it with right sides together right here. Just trying to keep it aligned in a straight line there. So, using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, stitch right across that line. So here is what the pocket looks like stitched on, and I know this probably on camera looks like a straight stitch. This is actually a stretch stitch on my regular sewing machine, and I'm going to have a link at the end of this video and underneath about how you can do different knit stitches that all stretch, because there's lots of different kinds. So now that I've got that sewn, I am going to flip my pocket down and realign those bottom edges. And then I am going to sew the 2 side seams. So I'm going to switch my pins that are holding that folded edge under, and I'm going to use them to pin through to the front of the shirt. And here I'm planning to use my cover stitch machine again to do the double stitching lines, just like I've got right here. You could also use a zigzag stitch, a stretch stitch, a twin needle. All of those are good options. Okay, I've got my front pocket sewn on, and I just wanted to emphasize that you want to reinforce your stitching at the pocket corners. So even if you need to switch to a straight stitch at those points, and so that you'll be able to reverse stitch, that's what I did up here with the stretch stitch. Or if you're using like a twin needle or a cover stitch, you want to make sure that those threads get pulled to the back side and knotted so that this is reinforced and it won't come undone as the pocket is used. Alright, now that we've got the front prepared, we are going to sew the back to it. So place the front and the back right sides together, match the shoulder seams, and we're going to stitch right across those shoulder seams using a stretch stitch. And here is what this looks like once the shoulder seams have been sewed. And what I want to do next is open this out flat, so that I can set in the sleeves. So I'm going to grab a sleeve here, and I'm going to match the center of the sleeve with that shoulder seam. Go ahead and stick on a pin so that they stay together, and then you can pin or clip if you want. I'm just going to match this while I'm at the machine, but you're going to match the rest of the sleeve to the rest of that armhole. So you'll stitch right along there. Do the same thing on the other side of the garment as well, so that you have both sleeves set in. Okay, once we have the sleeve sewn on, cut my serger thread ends, you're going to have something that looks like this, with the neck hole in the middle here, and then you've got sleeves out to each side. If we pick this up and fold it by the shoulders, you can see how it's starting to resemble a sweatshirt. So what you need to do next is match those underarm seams, and then we're going to sew one long seam here. So it's going to go all the way from the wrist to the armpit and then down the side seam. And go ahead and do that with a stretch stitch as well. Okay, once we have those underarm and side seams sewn, this is what the sweatshirt's going to look like. And we want to go ahead and turn it right side out so that we can finish it up. So the next thing we need to do is add the waistband and the cuffs. And the process is going to be similar for each. You want to fold this in half, matching up those short edges, and sew that with a stretch stitch. And then you want to fold wrong sides together, matching up the seam allowances. We're going to do the same thing with the wrist cuffs. All right, just like that. So let's start with the wrist cuffs. What we're going to do is, with the sleeve right side out, we are going to take a cuff and we're going to match up those seam allowances, and we're going to place the cuff over the sleeve. And you want to, like I said, match up all those seam allowances in that area. And then on the other side of the cuff, we're going to match that up with the folded edge of the sleeve. the center of the sleeve. And you'll notice that the cuff is not as big as the sleeve. So what we're going to do as we stitch is stretch the cuff to match the sleeve. So I'm going to take you over to the sewing machine and we'll go ahead and do this. Okay, in order to sew the sleeve cuff, what I like to do is get the presser foot inside the cuff of the sleeve. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing this on a serger or on a sewing machine. It's easier, in my opinion, with the presser foot inside the sleeve. Take a little bit of time to make sure that those raw edges get aligned. And then once my fabric is under the needle here, right there, then I'm going to start stretching to make sure that the cuff stretches to fit the sleeve. Okay, once we've got those cuffs sewn on, here's what they look like. And you can see that's what pulls in the sweatshirt around your wrist so that your wrist stays warm. Next, we're going to do the waistband, and that happens in almost the same way, but there are just a couple of things that I want to note. First of all, I like to go ahead and mark quarter points on my waist of my sweatshirt and on my waistband before, and then match those up. And that's because it's a lot longer than the cuffs, so having those halfway points to match up like you would on the cuffs, it just isn't enough on the waistband to evenly stretch it and to do so easily. Okay, so center back, center front, when you match those together, then you'll find the two side seams, and I'm just marking these with pins. And then the two side seams on the sweatshirt are actually going to be the side quarter points, so then all you have to do is match the two side seams and you'll find center front and center back. Once I've got that done, then take the waistband and you can match it. And I pull those pins and I like to replace them with a clip because I'm going to be doing this on the serger. Alright, so go ahead, head to the serger or the sewing machine using a stretch stitch, and you're going to stretch that waistband until it is flat against the waistline of the sweatshirt and sew those together all the way around. Okay, once you have the waistband sewn on, here's what it's going to look like. And it's got that seam there. If you would like, you can go and use a stretch stitch and press that seam allowance up towards the sweatshirt, and then on the right side, top stitch right above the waistband to make sure that this lays flat. But that is completely optional, and I'm going to skip that step. The last thing we need to do to finish off this hoodie is to add the hood. So what you're going to want to do is open up your sweatshirt, match your shoulder seams so that you can mark the center front and center back of your neckline. Then at the center back neckline, we want to match the seam from the hood. So we're going to pin those right sides together. And then at the center front, you want to overlap so that the left side of the hood is going to be on first, and then the right side is going to be behind it, and that the two of those overlap right at the center. And then you're going to keep those hoodie strings out of the way, and you want to fit the rest of the neckline around. So as you're pinning or clipping, if you get to the center front and you don't have enough to match the neckline, you can adjust what you've got overlapped at the center front. And you want to do this without stretching either the hood or the neckline of the sweatshirt. Just make sure everything is good and matched up. Okay, once you've got all of that matched around, you want to sew around the neckline to attach the hood and finish that neckline. Okay, once you have sewn around the neckline of the hood, here's what it looks like, and there is the completed hoodie.